This show was previously broadcast live on ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com.
Welcome to another edition of Expanding Mind. I'm your host, Erik Davis, and we continue to explore here the culture of consciousness. And I think one of the general things you can say about human beings is that they love music. Almost everybody you know loves music. In fact, it's actually kind of odd when you meet somebody who doesn't love music. If you think about it, you probably maybe know one or two, and it's sort of a little peculiar. Like, what? You don't listen to music? You don't really buy music? You don't go to see live music? No, I don't really like music. It's very peculiar. It's like not liking sex or ice cream or something. And I think it's because music goes down extremely deep, deeper than all other art forms. It's the closest we have to what you might call our spirit, whether you think about that in religious terms or you think about it in terms of the consciousness of that is booted up in our neurophysiological systems. But there's something deeply resonant about music, and that's partly why music is so deeply bound up with the life of the spirit, particularly in terms of religion, that all religions, while they have their art forms, they have their architecture, to my mind, they are expressed in terms of any kind of aesthetic expression the most richly in the musics associated with them. I'm a huge fan of religious music, popular, traditional, classical, world-based, all over, because there's some extra element that is added into religious music. And I think that even for many secular people, that our love and experience of music has a spiritual quality, even if we wouldn't use those terms. That's why, people get so crazy in their fandom for whatever kind of music they love, and people just get overwhelmed by it. They get transported by listening to their favorite music, sometimes literally. If you look at the history of rock music, for example, you'll find that there's a lot of altered states involved in the experience and certainly the production of a lot of rock music, where people were going not just to enjoy songs, not just to listen to lyrics that had meaning in their lives, not just to enjoy the celebrity of a performer that they identified with, but they actually move into a different kind of experience, move into an altered state, a transcendent place, a kind of trance place. And of course, if you go back, that's just in popular culture. And if you go back looking at traditional cultures and traditional religious cultures, you're going to find more and more of this interweaving of music with actual trance, with ecstasy, with religious awe, even with possession in the case of music from West Africa or Haiti or the Caribbean, where there's actually direct connections between music and the invocation of spirits and gods. So there's a very powerful dimension to the religious aspect of music, just from the perspective of being a music fan, but also I think for being someone who's interested in the way that culture and consciousness can weave together, create new worlds and new kinds of experience. I know that my life was really changed a few years ago when I discovered just a marvelous box set, one of my favorite collections of music ever, called Goodbye Babylon, which was a collection of early American religious music. Like a lot of music fans, I was pretty familiar with pre-war blues music. I listened to a lot of old recordings of the great Mississippi and Delta blues guys, and so I was sort of modestly familiar with some of the country and jazz stuff that comes from that period of time, but there's this enormous wealth of religious music that was discovered a little later than a lot of those other genres in terms of people collecting and releasing them. And this collection of this music was absolutely extraordinary. And I found myself listening to it more like I would listen to a prayer or a sermon or a tape of some Buddhist teacher than the way I would normally listen to other kinds of music, even though I'm not a Christian, even though I don't buy, and in fact I have a lot of problems with the worldview that a lot of the people are putting forward in these collections. So I'm fascinated by gospel music, and I'm really happy to have on the show today Mike McGonigal, who's just released or compiled and helped release a marvelous collection of obscure American gospel music from a somewhat later period. And we'll get to Mike in a second, but I just want to introduce our co-host here on Expanding Mind's own esoteric librarian, Maja Daou. I suspect that you also are a fan of religious and particularly gospel music, Maja. Am I correct?
Oh, man, I so totally am. I have been since I was a teenager. I got really into Mahalia Jackson when I was younger, and then that led to, staple singers and all that kind of amazing old gospel music. And it's funny because it actually relates to esoterica. I did a little research back in the day, and a lot of the, African-American gospel and spiritual music goes to this kind of undercurrent of worship for Moses. In fact, there was a huge kind of almost magical hoodoo connection to worship of Moses in the slaves, and that kind of spurred a lot of the spirituals. And actually Zora Neale Hurston wrote a couple books about that, like Moses Man on the Mountain and things like that. And actually that occult book, some of you might know about, the 6th and 7th books of Moses, they used to tear off a little piece of that book, and some of the slaves would just carry a little piece of it with them because they thought it was so magical. And then a lot of the spiritual and gospel songs would be kind of inspired by Moses, who they believed to be, this African American who overcame all these kind of troubles and sorrow in his life. So he became kind of this hero that inspired a lot of that. It's an interesting little esoteric connection to gospel music. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got really into it.
That's great. Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about the history of gospel music and African American religious music in America, because it's so different in many ways from the musics that arose from the fundamentally slave populations in the Caribbean and South America. And there are real distinct historical reasons for that that have to do with American religion, that have to do with, for example, the strictures on drums that was found in the United States, which were not, with the exception of New Orleans, which you really didn't find in colonies in the Caribbean and South America. So that restriction forced African American musical evolution into different directions, and so some of the ecstatic quality of the singing and the clapping that you have in gospel music is sort of like a transmutation of what in Cuba or in Brazil would be a drum, a polyrhythmic drum expression. So it's a real interesting way, the way that there's a certain twist of African American music in the West. But I'm nattering on here, and I want to bring on Mike McGonigal. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Mike for many, many years and admire his writing, his editing, his excellent taste in music and art and culture, and the many journals and publishing endeavors he's been a part of. And I think his latest collection, Fire in the Bones, which 3 CD set that just came out from Tompkins Square, is one of the best things you've ever done, Mike. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, and it's been great listening to you guys.
So tell me a little bit about how you got...
what I was going to say.
Well, tell me, first, I always like to ask people kind of on a personal story tip. I mean, I know you've been a music fan forever, but tell me about how and when and why you started to really get into gospel music and really start digging into it.
Well, I am always someone who's gone back and tried to find, when I get into something, I'm like, well, this is great, but what's the root of this? So when I was like 15, 16, I, was a big fan of the Rolling Stones, and so that led me to Mississippi Fred McDowell, who's a great Delta blues singer who had been singing in the 20s and 30s, but he wasn't recorded until the late 50s when Alan Lomax discovered him, and his version of the spiritual "You Got to Move" is what the Rolling Stones had covered. So, like, okay, I'll check this guy out. And then on a whim, I picked up a record of his called "Amazing Grace," which is this amazing record recorded with a small choir in Como, Mississippi, which is, for many reasons, this like incredibly, just to me, like just magical place where so much music was allowed to exist. Like you mentioned about how drums were taken away from most slaves because they were using them to communicate to each other, and like, you know, people eventually noticed that, hey, every time they use drums at night, like something happens the next day, like somebody escapes or something. So I guess because it was like lax in Como that that was allowed to continue. So there's all this amazing stuff there, which I didn't discover till later. But so this one record is just like, it was so amazing that it got me over, like at first, like a lot of people, I think I listened to and enjoyed records like George Jones's recordings of sacred material and other things. But there's an element of irony there maybe. But with this recording, it was just so amazing that it just forced me to just accept it on its own terms and to just enjoy it. But I thought it was like an anomaly. I didn't realize that this record was part of a tradition. I just thought it was, hey, weird blues guy, cool blues guy making this weird gospel music. And then later I realized that it goes back to the gospel and blues were initially just branches or roots that were so close to each other that in the beginning they were basically indistinguishable, and that often, like when we look at certain artists and we call them, we group them as one or the other, that at the time those people made their living singing any number of things.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, like how much when you grow up being a rock fan, and how the blues is like this, you know, mythology, basically, that you're sort of inducted in. You have this idea the blues is the source of rock and roll, and you follow it. And then there's all these cultural associations, cliches, archetypes associated with the blues and the blues man and the, you know, the sort of wasted wandering life and the difficulty and all this kind of stuff. And then you start going back and actually listening to recordings, and you get interested in an artist like Skip James or something who has some like completely spooky, creepy, dark blues. And then you're like, wait, but then there's these like religious tracks on here. What's that? And it kind of, it does a number to your head because we're so encultured in a certain mythology of the blues that, as you say, is not really historically accurate, and doesn't also acknowledge the way that the blues sensibility itself is thoroughly bound up with religious music and religious ideas in a way you don't get when you just see it from that rock and roll perspective.
Yeah, it's something that I'm still it's still like a revelation to me, like how bound up in each other they are. Where to me they're very often there's very little difference between early gospel and early blues. What we kind of think of as gospel music is basically a really modern music that incorporates elements from blues, and a lot of times like material from spirituals and stuff. But it's like these new arrangements that started to happen around 1920 when this guy Thomas Dorsey, who was a pretty decent blues guy, had a conversion, and then he started writing and arranging these songs in this amazing way. And you mentioned Mahalia before. Mahalia was sort of sent forth as not just a proselytizer of religion, but of Thomas Dorsey's arrangements and going all over the country. And
it's interesting because it almost seems like there was a split between, like you guys had mentioned, the people's perception of blues. It's like blues became associated with the devil, which is kind of where rock and roll went, and then like gospel went all Jesus. But they both had like the same root, but for some reason they kind of split in two different directions. And I think what you're saying with those newer arrangements, it all kind of got more focused on the Jesus aspect, especially with Mahalia, and then it kind of went like with Robert Johnson, and then all the devil stuff, like everyone associated the blues only with the devil and not with like the other spiritual songs that were coming out.
Yeah, but it also is, that's true, but also, I mean, culturally, like, you know, there were a lot of singers who will tell you that, you know, I wasn't allowed to sing blues, or that I was told that that's bad, even though like you listen to two songs next to each other, and it's kind of like what happened in the mid '50s with soul, where you just Ray Charles just replaced to be very reductive, replaces the word God with the word baby or woman, and it's like we're on the surface that seems just stepping back from it a little bit, it's like the same song, but of course in terms of its meaning and how it rings out, then it was very different. So
but
that's
really
even
that
interesting
transformation is kind of like it tells us something really deep about emotions, about spirit, about love, because while the meaning becomes very different and the way that the song moves and plugs into the culture is very different, if you can say that there is sort of a kind of energy or an emotional energy that is appropriate to successful, non-ironic religious music or gospel music, it has this certain kind of vibe that you talk about. Like you hear it and there's something raw about it. There's something undeniable. You have to, on some level, accept that emotion on its own terms. But then that emotion doesn't go away with the secularization of that impulse in soul music. It transforms, almost the way in our own lives. This is all over mystical literature. Our yearning for God is bound up with our attractions for the other, for beauty, and for the people we fall in love with in our lives. So it always seemed fascinating to me that the music itself told you something very deep about the life of the spirit just by the way it moves through history and how it affects people in different times and places.
That's a really good point. Another thing that changes is when you go from God to baby and you are making music in a more commercial realm. There's a whole different level of considerations that come in. So for me, one of the great draws to gospel is that it's a music that's just about communicating this one thing, and so it's the good news. So gospel means good news, and so it's like it's allowed to be in many situations a lot weirder, a lot more raw. Just so long as that's coming through. Like if you're shouting and you're like out of key, that's okay. You don't need to go back and do another take. You don't need to add a string arrangement necessarily. Like Sam Cooke made wonderful, wonderful music in his, for want of a better word, secular career. And but I would argue that Change Is Gonna Come is basically is a total gospel song, but that's a whole other thing. But when I go back and listen to him when he's saying gospel with the Soul Stirrers, that's what really hits me, just personally. So that's one thing that again I just always am finding so much to enjoy about this music because of that, because of the rawness.
What do you
that's
think
really
about,
what you go ahead, Maja.
I was just going to say, what do you think about that, how it gets split from God to baby, and how one end goes not only more popularized, but also sexualized, and that a lot of those then blues and rock and roll, like all the Rolling Stone songs, become more like Bottom Shock or all sexualized, and then the gospel music is all basically saying the same thing, but instead of sexualized, it kind of gets brought up to that God place.
Yeah, I've done some research into this, and when they were having big programs with people like Sam Cooke during the so-called golden age of gospel, when there was all this amazing quartet and soloist music, basically right at the end of World War II to the start of rock and roll, and there was a lot of people showing up who their screams sounded decidedly, towards the sexual, and there was discussion about this, and to me it's a big element of what's really interesting about gospel is the sexualized side to it. To me, it's just like what I like about it is it's just sort of allowed to be there, and it's just one of those things that people don't really talk about too much. And then, so I think what other people are picking up on when they use similar sounds and make it more overt is, they're just doing something that's just more obvious, to it. And to me, it's just like these certain sounds are malleable, and can express like really, really different emotions. And I like when it's all just sort of wrapped up together, as well as when it's just a really just sort of raw demonstration of sort of one thing or the other, you know?
Well, let's go. I want to give a little listen to some of the music that we've got queued up for the audience from your collection, and we can see where that takes us, because a lot of these tunes are much more recent, and they're really of the post-war period, but they still have that rawness and authenticity, if you want to use that kind of dangerous word, that we think of associated with earlier recordings, which is really what's really remarkable about the collection. So let's see. I think the first cut we're going to hear is "Working on a Building" from
Yes.
Reverend Louis Overstreet. Can you tell me a little bit about this track and why you chose it?
This is from a private release in the late '60s, and Overstreet had first been captured by the great folklorist Chris Stratchwitz, who started our Hooli Records, when he was just on a trip across the country, and he stopped in Arizona and saw this amazing family group preaching on the street in front of a tavern, and this guy was an amazing just sort of modal, very bluesy guitarist, and it has a real rawness to it, but what I have come to learn is that this is just a continuation of the sanctified sort of street performer tradition that is pretty well documented already on records like the one that you mentioned, the great Dust to Digital, Goodbye Babylon collection, or John Fahey's great American Primitive collection. So it's a continuation of that sound. And on this record, he was credited as evangelist and pastor, Elder L. Overstreet Sr., Memphis National Convocation outdoor preacher since 1961.
Well, excellent. Well, let's hear "Working on a Building" from Reverend Louis Overstreet.
I'm working on a building. Working on a building. It's truly foundation. It's a truly foundation. I'm holding up the blood. I'm holding up the blood of rain. Blood from the Lord. Rain from the Lord. Oh, as soon as I get
River Street, working on a building, and you were talking about the sanctified singers. What does that mean, sanctification? Because that seems to me one of those ideas in American religion, American Protestantism, that is a religious idea, but it also comes out of it a very distinct attitude about music and expression and performance. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, as I understand it, sanctification just simply literally means making holy. It's, this widespread ancient concept, but as it relates to this really amazing, modern thing that happened is that after the Azusa Street revival, which is, I think, started around 1908 in Los Angeles, is that you had this Pentecostal holiness movement start, which is a very kind of democratic, almost punk rock take on Christianity, where basically they're saying if you feel God inside you, you can go and start your own church, and then there's other ones that you can work within, the Church of God in Christ being the largest. And if you were to purely go to church for the music, I would say just find the smallest Kojic church near you and go there, and it's going to be great. It's kind of as much as anything, my understanding is it relates to that, and it's really, I'm fascinated by the fact that these are such a modern movement that it follows the rise of gospel and of that they kind of are happening right around the same time, around the 20s, and
they're
really
definitely feeding one another. I mean, one way of looking at it is that one of the models, like all the different variations of Christianity, they often looks at different moments in the Gospels as or in the New Testament as kind of origin stories. So we know about the snake handlers, which is a certain branch of Pentecostals, and they're looking at texts that support the idea that those who are in the Spirit can sort of they handle serpents, and they mention serpents, and then they grab a hold of that one little line and they turn it into a whole practice and performance. For sanctification, one of the things they're looking at is this moment of Pentecost at the beginning of Acts, when this fire descends from heaven, fire in the bones, and it allows people to prophesy and to speak in tongues and to speak in other languages, to express themselves with a kind of intuitive, inspirational power that then, so if you create the idea that that's possible, that we too can have that Spirit touch us, and you get this democratic but also very ecstatic experience. I mean, the Azusa Street revivals were crazy. You had people from all different races rolling around on the ground, singing out loud, thousands of people just totally getting off. And whether you think about that in terms of religion or in terms of neuroscience or in terms of culture, it was an extraordinary explosion. And then out of that comes this idea that in music, that the expression in music can have that inspirational, spontaneous, immediately expressive channel from the Spirit. And I think that's partly what we pick up on in these really powerful recordings. The recording is poorly done, the guitar's out of tune, but there's something coming through that's you cannot deny it.
Eric, I think a really good example, one of my favorite examples of that is that song by Blind Willie Johnson, Dark Was the Night. Have you ever heard that one, Cold Was the Ground? He's literally just moaning, he doesn't say any words at all, but the whole thing is this ecstatic moan for the whole song, and that was from the 1920s when a lot of that stuff was happening. And a lot of it, they don't even use words.
Well, that song is actually, he was taking a hymn that would be known to most of the people hearing that song, and he was doing it. The 9 notes on that song are from a hymn, right? And it was a lined out hymn, so which means lining is the preacher will say, the words of the song and say them in the notes of their song, and then it'll be sung back in this like, you know, sort of drawn out way. And so that's what he was able to reproduce in that song. But also, you're right, that song is just so amazing, and it's like there's nothing else on earth like that song. And you know, there's books to be about that song, you know.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear another tune. I think the next track that we were thinking about playing is Powers in the Heart of Man from brother and sister W.B. Great, which is from the same period of time, late 60s. Tell me a little bit about this track.
I don't know anything about this, and I don't know anyone who knows anything about it, including the one person that I know who has a copy of it. It was released on a label called Port City, which was likely based in Wilmington, North Carolina. And what I think is amazing about this song is it just shows you how, you know, we may have certain like ideas about what like Christianity might preach or be about, and then you hear something like this and hear people preaching something that is, I think, very beautiful and kind of almost Unitarian or something. It's just so, it just really, I guess, just very open-minded and amazing. So.
Well, before we hear it, just talk a little bit about like the level of obscurity you're saying in this like there's one guy you know who has it. I mean, you really were doing some serious digging to find the material in this in this collection.
Yeah. Well, a lot of help was given to me by this wonderful person in Alabama named Kevin Nutt, who he has a label called Case Quarter that has, and he was sort of like further along than me in a lot of ways and was helpful. So he connected me with this group of collectors who there's this track comes from this guy Big Joe Lewis, who's been collecting obscure gospel for many years, and then other tracks. You know, I've just been going around just trying to find whatever, and you just find, you know, sometimes you find like you're just digging for hours in like, you know, some weird thrift store, and you find this record that you can tell was privately released. You know, it's gospel. It's got like a hand-drawn cover. It's like, this is going to be so great. And you take it home and you realize you just discovered, like, you know, the Black Helen Reddy that no one knew about. And it's like, oh. And then there's things where, you know, that are kind of transcendent that make it all worthwhile. But what was really amazing is that this particular group of collectors in this project were really, for the most part, just so helpful, and just would either lend an original copy of something that there's one copy of, or one known copy of, or they would you know, transfer it themselves. But just like the kind of people weren't like super ghost worldy. They weren't like hoarding their records and you know and hoarding information. They were really sharing it, and that's really amazing.
Well, that's beautiful, man. Because I mean, maybe the music's doing some good. maybe it's not accidental. So let's hear "Powers in the Heart of Man."
Yeah.
First selection.
Do you need power? Do you need power? Do you need power? It's in the heart of man. Where is the power? Is a question that's been asked from time to time. That question. Well, let me tell a little story. It's in the heart of man. It's about an old ancient God who will decide to hide the power of the universe so man couldn't find it to destroy it himself. Once they decide to hide God's power on the top of the highest mountain, But they knew that man would climb to the top of the mountain. Once they decide to hide in God's power in the bottom of the sea. But they knew that man would plunge to the depth of the sea. Once they decide to hide in God's power in the middle of the earth. But they knew that soon only the man would boil away to the middle of the earth. Here we have the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And one of the wisest heads said, we should hide God's power in a place where man would never think to look. They decide to hide God's power there in the heart of man. In the heart of man, there's a place where all God's power store. I don't care whether you're a man, a woman, a boy, or a girl. You should check from whence cometh your source of power. God made man in his own image. God made man in his own likeness. God give man the dominion over the whole world.
Well, this is an extremely powerful number. Yeah. Power's in the heart of man. That's really, and I want to ask you, Mike, we've talked about this before, and it's a question that I really want to hear from you. Is that at a certain point, as you develop more and more sensitivity to this music, you understand more and more. You understand where the words and the images come from. You understand the power of the emotions and the feelings and the yearning and the religion that produce them, and you're enjoying it as a musical expression. How do you feel? Is there any conflict there because you're not a Christian? You're not. You probably have issues with some of the traditional Pentecostal and evangelical ideas that a lot of these people are operating in. How do you reconcile those feelings? How do you deal with the way of how much that music means to you, and yet it's coming from a world that in some ways is really not yours?
Well, the only part that bothers me about that personally that I care about now is if I go into a church, if I'm just dealing with these performers, that I want to be sure that I show respect. And I talk about going to church for the music, and I do, but there's always something else that happens there too. Like if I have an open mind myself and I go to a church, I'm gonna hear something good. Unless I'm going to like a Klan rally church or something, like I'm gonna hear something. And if someone happens to be talking, in a way that's like preaching also against other things, and then I just, will, I just like hope that they get to be more open-minded later in their life. The same way that they might be thinking that towards me, and if we're both real about it and not like a jerk about it, then there's no conflict. Because if you go at something that you love with love, like there's not going to be real conflict. It's interesting to me that this comes up so often in gospel, whereas if I was talking about like some weird peyote chomping group of people who make amazing music in some other country, like this wouldn't come up at all. That they believe in like a blue guy that comes down from the sky versus a son of God. Like, and I think it's just because a lot of us were brought up in a certain way that then maybe had to resist later. And then I think I'm lucky because I was brought up a very light version of Episcopalian, which is Catholic light. So, when I was like in 3rd or 4th grade, I said to my mom, I don't want to go to church anymore, and she said, I don't either. So, So, and then later, for various reasons, I came to believe in God, but it's a very kind of crunchy, my own idea of God, which is something that I don't bring up when I go, when I deal with people from the gospel world, because there's no need to. So there was a point of resistance early on, because I didn't necessarily want to hear so much songs that had God and Jesus in them, and I had that despite having a lot of baggage myself. So I understand that, but the more I dig into this, the more I understand this music was the musical power, the musical force behind the civil rights movement. It has just so much cultural and social significance, as well as the music, which to me is just I never would have thought this 20 years ago, but it's just become like my favorite music.
Great. Hey, so we got to take a short break here. We're playing something, so we'll be right back with another track from Fire in the Bones.
You are listening to Progressive Radio Network.
Hello. Check out my show, The Animal Magnet Pet Radio, live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on Progressive Radio Network. Or catch it anytime you like by scrolling through the archives. You'll hear me, Deborah Wolf, best-selling author and award-winning radio host, chatting with the best pet experts and animal A-listers in the world about controversial topics like breed bans, the indoor versus outdoor cat debate, and whatever else is hot in the news and on their minds that matters to animals and the people who love them. Plus, we tell pet jokes, we'll give you trivia and smart, quirky facts, recipes, and take-home tricks and tests, homework your pets will love. Email your pet problems to me, and we'll solve them on air. So listen to The Animal Magnet on Progressive Radio Network and get your animal fix.
Hey, did you miss your favorite show? Don't worry, PRN has you covered. Just log on to ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com and go to the archive page, where you can choose from any of our great programs. Listen or download shows from yesterday, or even ones dating months back. The Progressive Radio Network, striving to make your lives easier.
Hi, I'm Darrell Clark.
Bob Levis.
Ron Waits. And we're your Progressive News Weekly team here on Progressive Radio Network.
Shank of the morning, the shank of the week. Wednesdays, 10 a.m., 11 a.m.
We are you, as if you had a mic in your hand the way we do.
It's news you can use. News for you, by you, and of you.
Grassroots activism.
That's all she wrote, folks.
Hotel with Sierra Club Radio. Tune in Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern on the ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com to hear interviews with green authors, activists, politicians, celebrities, and more.
You are listening to the Progressive Radio Network, your number one source for progressive commentary.
Now we're back here with Mike McGonigal, who compiled the marvelous collection of raw gospel, Fire in the Bones. And we got about 15 minutes left here, and I'd love to hear another tune. The next song up is Prayer, I Love the Lord, from the Clear Creek Missionary Baptist Church congregation, and this is from the 80s. Tell me about this track, Mike.
This recording originally appeared on an album called Moving in the Spirit, Music Through the Spirit in the Afro-American Community, which was a Southern Cultural Folklife project that was overseen by William Ferris, the great folklorist who I believe was, during the Clinton years, was like head of the NEA or something, which is kind of amazing, and was recorded by two other people, Britt Fitz and Therese Smith, and I like this one a lot.
All right, well, let's hear it.
Our Father, now to you.
Yes, Lord.
Bless the one, oh Father, the line on the bed of figure C.
Yes, Lord.
He directs and plans for the Father that's going to sleep with Frederick. Now, Father, bless the man go stand in the gateway today. For the Father bless his home. Bless his Sunday too. Oh, Lord, please, Jesus, be with us, dear Jesus. Bless my company. Holy Father, bless my companion today. Able to hold apostle meet out today. It said be thy will. Now, Father, when I'm gone, every step of the way, can't do no more. Holy Father, we ask you to save through my prayer for Christ's sake. Amen. I love the Lord. He heard my cry.
Some of those like kind of moany, like, you know, drawn out, ecstatic-y group, just like so things that Erik was talking about before. Mike, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and just pay homage to your earlier career as well. Erik had mentioned how you go to such depths to search out these obscure materials through your collector friends, and I just wanted to make sure people knew about some of your earlier projects. Back in the day, I was a fan of your Chemical Imbalance zine, which had all of these obscure comics and like rock music and punk stuff, and then you kind of have evolved that into Yeti magazine, which is an absolutely amazing magazine that also has tremendous comic artists and great bands. And I was just wondering if, you know, you could talk a little bit about your adventures in kind of accumulating all of these amazing things, like not just with your gospel music, but in how you really are this purveyor of compilations of amazing culture.
Well, thank you. So I think the best description of Yeti that I've heard is someone called it a general interest magazine for people with marginal interests. And that's good. So I don't know. You know, at the time that I was working in my first zine to like combine, you know, my interest in literature and visual art and music, that wasn't as common as it is now. And so I feel like, okay, well that was done. And then when I'm doing Yeti, it's just kind of stuff that my friends and I are interested in, that we might have an interesting take on it. So it could be something older, it could be a translation of something that's old. and it could just be, you know, like I just for the there's an issue that's just out this week, and I interviewed my favorite band in Portland where I live called Explode Into Colors, who are this polyrhythmic female three-piece who are like a lot like this band ESG, who are a great sort of, I think they were from the Bronx. They were just very stripped down funk, and so they're taking that and doing their own thing with it, and you know, they just have singles out now, you know, so it's great to be able to do that. A lot of it came from the frustration when I was trying full time to be an arts writer for other people, and everything have to be based on release dates, excuse me, and kind of nothing else. And a lot of times, you know, you would get a record and get to spend like a couple hours with it before you had to turn in your review, especially if, like me, you're a procrastinator. And, you know, there's something to that, and you can get to be good at describing something, but, you know, it's hard to go, you know, much deeper into anything. So, you know, I started it when I had a little extra money, and a friend of mine had a little extra money when we were both working at Amazon back in extra money days, which seems so long ago, like 10 years ago. And, you know, I just wanted to do something that was just, you know, it would just be really varied all the time. And I really admire magazines like Cabinet that can do things like on a theme, and sometimes I see that there was a theme later, but even that to me seems like too much of a constraint. So what's neat is it kind of just changes. You know, like the last issue was more literary, this one's more music and visual, and a lot of you know, what I like collect or whatever is just, I guess, just knowledge of you know, just, I don't know, it's just what I'm into. It's hard.
Well, it's so
I don't think of myself as a collector. I guess I have a lot of stuff, but
it's like if any of you had that best friend growing up that was always into all the rad stuff, and they'd make you rad mixtapes, like that's like your career. You're everybody's best friend that makes the best rad mixtapes.
Oh, that is very nice.
Well, the one thing I would say that unites your stuff, and I've noticed this, you know, from the days of Chemical Imbalance, whether you're writing about, you know, a French surrealist poet or a garage rock band or some rad comic book artist, is that there's a certain freshness to the form or to the writing or whatever that I associate partly with what draws you to gospel, because there's something unmediated, there's something unironic or unself-reflective, you know, about a lot of the stuff. It's like it jumps off the page or it jumps off the record. It's like it's not been processed. And a lot of what I hate about culture now, and I have a similar kind of fatigue with, as being, you know, someone who I used to write a lot about music as well, and I just got really tired with the whole culture industry. Is it's so processed and framed and packaged and set up, and you know, this is a kind of generic complaint to make, but that doesn't mean that that stuff doesn't keep happening, that people don't keep making something genuinely new or something genuinely surprising, something that even if it's very genre-driven, like some of the garage rock you like is like super cliched in terms of like the chord progressions or the style of performance or recording, but nonetheless there's these sort of jewels where you got to go, wow, something's really happening there that's fresh, and you've just always had a great sensibility for that. Yeah,
well, thanks. I mean, I don't want to sound anti-irony, because I'm not, and like a lot of my favorite artists are, you know, completely use that, like a writer like Robert Walzer writing 100 years ago. There's so much amazing humor and irony in there, but it's not just for that. Like there's also a lot else happening, In terms of like new stuff and garagey stuff, what's amazing to me is that anybody can use these 3 chords and some loud amp and somehow make it sound fresh. And a lot of times it's just a really subtle thing that someone will do, just a little tweak. Like I'll say that, Explode Into Color sound like ESG, and they do, but then there's also something completely new about them. Even if that complete thing is very subtle, it's enough. And a lot of that, I think comes from just, being open to the fact that the best rock music is often going to be made by someone who's, like 19 years old, and you just have to stay open to that and go to like house party shows when people look at you like, what, are you here to like, take the drummer home because you're their dad or something? And which is cool because I used to be the youngest kid at shows, and it's neat to go from one to the other. I think the main thing is just keeping it. I just don't understand not having passion for stuff. I understand that certain scenes can lose their juice because that's bound to happen. I see it starting to happen with this great explosion of new sort of weird garage bands in the last couple of years. I see sort of copycats starting to happen, and of course, as more energy gets focused on it, it dies because that's what happens to art. The second you turn a spotlight and money on it, it withers away and goes and hides under another rock.
Mm. Well, I'm glad you have devoted yourself to uncovering the rocks, because as Maja says, it's great for the rest of us who don't have the skills to pull it out, and especially for this revelation of post-war gospel music, and I really encourage listeners to check out Fire in My Bones 3 CD collection on Tompkins Square. And so Mike, thanks so much. And is there any place you can point to people? What's a good URL for Yeti to give folks?
We have a very 1995 website at yetipublishing.com, and you can find the stuff there. And there's CDs that come with each issue that people share and torrent and put up on the internet, so you can check it out that way if you want to hear the music. And
great.
And then you can buy the books from us.
Great. Well, thanks again, Mike, and thank you, Maja.
Thanks,
guys.